A billionaire was enjoying Alfredo pasta, until a waitress said, "You don't remember me, do you?" David Chen twirled another forkful of Alfredo pasta, the rich cream sauce catching the soft amber light of Romano's, Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurant. At 42, he'd grown accustomed to the quiet luxury that surrounded him. The crisp white tablecloths, the gentle murmur of well-dressed diners, the way servers moved like shadows, anticipating his every need before he even realized he had one. His phone buzzed with another seven-figure deal closing, but tonight he decided to savor this simple pleasure without distraction. The pasta was perfect, just like everything else money could buy. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the familiar flavors transport him somewhere he couldn't quite place. Somewhere that felt like warmth and laughter and the scent of garlic in a much smaller kitchen. When he opened them, a waitress stood beside his table, her dark eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You don't remember me, do you?" she said softly, her voice carrying something between hope and resignation. "Where are you watching from tonight? I'd love to know who's joining us for this story." David looked up from his pasta, fork suspended midway to his mouth. The woman standing beside his table wore the standard black uniform of Romano's staff, but something about her presence felt different, more personal than professional. Her nameplate read Isabella, and though her face seemed familiar, he couldn't quite place where he might have seen her before. "I'm sorry," he said, setting down his fork and offering his practiced businessman's smile. "Have we met? Perhaps at one of the charity galas or business functions?" He'd attended hundreds of such events over the years, shaking hands with countless people whose names and faces blurred together in his memory. Isabella's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been disappointment crossing her features. She glanced around the restaurant, ensuring her manager wasn't watching, then looked back at him. "Not quite," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a long time ago. Before all this." She gestured vaguely toward his expensive suit, the gold watch glinting on his wrist. David felt an odd stirring in his chest, like the faint echo of a song he'd once known by heart but could no longer recall the words to. He studied her face more carefully, the gentle curve of her smile, the way her eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when she spoke. There was something about her that seemed to reach across time, touching a part of him he'd buried beneath years of board meetings and business acquisitions. "I'm sorry, but I really can't place you," he admitted, though he found himself wishing he could. There was a warmth in her eyes that made him feel oddly nostalgic for something he couldn't name. Isabella nodded, as if she'd expected this response. "It's okay," she said, but her voice carried a weight that suggested it wasn't really okay at all. "I should get back to work. Enjoy your meal, Mr. Chen." She turned to walk away, but something in the way she said his name, with a familiarity that spoke of shared history rather than professional courtesy, made him want to call her back. But the words stuck in his throat, and he watched her disappear into the bustling restaurant, leaving him alone with his cooling pasta and a growing sense that he'd just missed something important. David couldn't concentrate on his meal. The Alfredo that had tasted perfect moments before now seemed bland, mechanical. He found himself scanning the restaurant for Isabella, catching glimpses of her as she moved between tables with practiced efficiency. Each time their eyes met briefly across the dining room, he felt that same strange tug of recognition, like trying to remember a dream that had felt absolutely real until the moment he woke up. He signaled for the check, but when another server approached, he heard himself asking, "Could you send Isabella over when she has a moment?" The word surprised him. David Chen didn't usually pursue conversations with restaurant staff beyond the polite necessities. When she returned to his table, he noticed she carried herself differently than the other servers. There was something graceful about her movements, confident despite the humble uniform. "You wanted to speak with me?" "This is going to sound strange," David began, "but I can't shake the feeling that I should know you. And the way you said my name earlier." He paused, studying her face. "Where do you think we might have met?" Isabella's expression softened, and for a moment she looked younger, almost vulnerable. "There used to be a little restaurant in Queens," she said quietly. "Mama Rosa's. My grandmother owned it. Just a small place, maybe 12 tables, but the food was made with love. We served fresh pasta every day, made from scratch in the back kitchen. Something clicked in David's memory, not quite clear, but like puzzle pieces beginning to find their places. Queens, he repeated slowly. I grew up in Queens. I know, Isabella said, and her smile was tinged with sadness. You used to come in every Tuesday and Thursday after school. Always order the same thing, spaghetti with meat sauce and a side of garlic bread. You'd sit at the corner table by the window, doing homework while you ate. Sometimes when you didn't have enough money, Nana would pretend she'd made too much food and couldn't let it go to waste. The memories hit him like a wave. Suddenly, he could see it all, the cramped, warm restaurant with its checkered tablecloths and the smell of oregano in the air. The elderly woman with flour-dusted hands who always had a kind word. And the girl who would sometimes bring him his food, who couldn't have been more than 13 at the time. If this moment is touching your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Isabella, he whispered, the name finally meaning something. Little Bella from Mama Rose's. The recognition that flooded David's face was everything Isabella had hoped for, yet somehow it hurt more than his blank stare had. She saw him remember the boy he used to be. 14 years old, skinny from growth spurts, wearing the same worn sneakers day after day. She watched as he recalled the afternoons he'd spent in her grandmother's restaurant, the only place that felt like home when his own house was too quiet, too empty with both parents working double shifts to make ends meet. Bella, he said again, this time with wonder. You were just a kid. You used to sneak me extra bread rolls when Nana wasn't looking. She always knew, Isabella said with a soft laugh. Nana had eyes in the back of her head. She just pretended not to notice because she knew you needed them. She glanced around the elegant restaurant surrounding them now. Things have certainly changed for you. David felt something crumble inside his chest. When did Mama Rose's close? He asked, though he was afraid he already knew the answer. About 10 years ago. The rent got too high, and we couldn't compete with the chain restaurants moving in. Nana fought to keep it open for as long as she could, but... Isabella's voice trailed off. She used to ask about you sometimes. Wondered what happened to the sweet boy who loved her meat sauce so much. The weight of guilt settled on David's shoulders like a heavy coat. He'd been so busy climbing the ladder of success, acquiring companies and accumulating wealth, that he'd never looked back. Not once had he thought to visit the little restaurant that had been his sanctuary during those difficult teenage years. Not once had he wondered about the kind woman who'd fed him when he couldn't afford a full meal, or the young girl who'd brightened his days with her shy smiles. Is she? He began, but couldn't finish the question. She passed 3 years ago, Isabella said gently. Peacefully, in her sleep. But she never forgot you, David. She kept a photo from your high school graduation that someone brought in. Said you were going to do great things. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had done great things, at least by the world's standards. But sitting here now, facing the girl who'd grown into this gracious woman, he felt smaller than he had in years. Have you ever lost touch with someone who shaped your life? Let us know in the comments. I should have come back, he whispered, the words barely audible above the restaurant's gentle ambience. David sat in silence for a long moment, his expensive meal forgotten, his mind reeling with memories and regret. Isabella stood patiently beside his table, her presence both comforting and challenging. He could see other diners beginning to notice their extended conversation, but for the first time in years, he didn't care about appearances or what others might think. I want to make this right, he said suddenly, looking up at her with an intensity that surprised them both. I know I can't go back and visit your grandmother, can't thank her for all the kindness she showed a lonely kid. But maybe I can do something now. Something that would honor her memory. Isabella's eyes widened. David, you don't need to. Yes, I do, he interrupted, his voice stronger now. I've spent the last 25 years building a fortune, but I never stopped to think about the people who helped me get here. Your grandmother didn't just feed me. She showed me what generosity looked like. What it meant to care about someone just because they needed caring about. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. What would it take to open another Mama Rose's? Somewhere in Queens, like the original. Same recipes, same warmth, same spirit of taking care of people who need it most. Isabella's hand went to her throat, a gesture so familiar it transported David back to their childhood in an instant. She'd always done that when she was overwhelmed, he remembered now. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything, David said, standing up from his table. I want to partner with you, Bella. I'll provide the funding, you provide the heart and the recipes. We'll create something that honors your grandmother's legacy while serving the community she loved. Tears gathered in Isabella's eyes. I still have all her recipes, she whispered. Handwritten in her notebook, with little notes in the margins about adding extra love to each dish. Then we have everything we need, David said, feeling more alive than he had in years. The success he'd achieved in boardrooms and stock markets paled in comparison to this moment of reconnection, this chance to transform his wealth into something meaningful. If you've been enjoying this story of second chances, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. There's just one condition, Isabella said, her smile returning. The first meal we serve has to be spaghetti with meat sauce, just like Nana used to make. 6 months later, David stood in the kitchen of the new Mama Rose's, watching Isabella put the finishing touches on a plate of spaghetti with meat sauce. The restaurant was smaller than Romano's, with only 15 tables and checkered tablecloths that reminded him of being 14 again, but it buzzed with the kind of warmth that no amount of money could manufacture. The walls were lined with photos, some from the original restaurant, others from their journey to open this new location. Order up, Isabella called, sliding the plate across the pass. David picked it up, still amazed by how natural it felt to carry food to customers instead of analyzing quarterly reports. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations of his company, appointing capable people to handle the details while he learned an entirely different kind of business, one measured not in profit margins but in satisfied smiles and families gathered around tables. The plate was destined for table 7, where a teenage boy sat hunched over his homework, counting coins on the table to make sure he had enough for his meal. David recognized the look of determined pride mixed with quiet worry. He'd worn that same expression decades ago at the original Mama Rose's. One spaghetti with meat sauce, David said, setting the plate down. The boy looked up, surprised by the personal attention. And don't worry about counting those coins. Today's meal is on the house. But I can pay, the boy protested, his cheeks reddening. I know you can, David said gently. But sometimes people take care of each other just because it's the right thing to do. Enjoy your meal. As he walked back toward the kitchen, David caught Isabella's eye. She was watching from behind the counter, her grandmother's recipe book open beside the register, a knowing smile on her face. In that moment, he understood what true wealth meant. Not the numbers in his bank account, but the connections that fed the soul. The dinner rush was beginning, and David rolled up his sleeves, ready to help serve. Each plate that went out carried more than food. It carried the legacy of a woman who'd understood that nourishment meant so much more than filling an empty stomach. Through her granddaughter's hands and David's resources, Mama Rose's spirit lived on, creating new memories for new generations. That evening, as they cleaned up after the last customer had left, Isabella placed her hand on his shoulder. Nana would be proud, she said simply. David nodded, unable to speak past the fullness in his throat. He'd spent years accumulating things, but it wasn't until he'd rediscovered the people who mattered that he'd truly found his way home. If you enjoyed this story of reconnection and second chances, please remember to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts about the importance of remembering those who shaped us, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't gold or silver, but the golden threads that connect us to each other across time. Thank you for joining us on this journey tonight.